You're dragging us down, Bennett. Other teams are already 2 days ahead. I didn't bother to look up from my clipboard, just kept monitoring the pressure gauges on the main drill shaft, jotting down notes in columns that had to align perfectly or we'd face serious trouble. My name's Cal Bennett, 48 years old, with 22 of those years spent working on offshore rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. I served as the senior safety inspector for Raven Rest Platform 6, located 50 miles off Galveston's coast, a place where errors don't just hit the budget, they cost lives. Chase Darnell stood nearby, clean in his spotless coveralls, arms folded, waiting for me to acknowledge him. He'd been our rig supervisor for exactly 3 weeks, a young guy, maybe 35. The Houston office sent him out with buzzwords like production efficiency and operational streamlining. I'd seen his type before. These secondary valve assemblies are showing erratic pressure patterns, I said, still not raising my eyes. We need to run a full diagnostic before the night crew takes over. Jesus Christ, Chase muttered. That'll take 4 hours. We're already behind schedule. Yeah, he stepped closer, lowering his voice even though the thunderous machinery would have drowned out a shotgun blast. Look, I get you're the veteran here, but corporate's breathing down my neck about output. We need to be drilling, not obsessing over equipment service last month. Finally, I looked up at him. His clean-shaven face already showed the weathered look salt air gives, but his eyes still held that mainland shine. Someone who viewed this rig as numbers on a spreadsheet, not as the metal island where 16 men slept each night. The primary couplings were showing where they shouldn't after only 4 weeks. I said, either the replacement parts aren't up to standard or someone's been pushing the system beyond limits when I'm off shift. Or maybe the equipment's fine and you're just being overly cautious. Chase said, I've gone through your logs. You file more safety reports than the other 3 platforms combined. I tucked my clipboard under my arm. Is that so? Yeah, it is. Makes me wonder if this rig actually has more issues or if you're just making paperwork to justify your position. I nodded as if I was thoughtfully considering his words, but a knot tightened in my gut. I'd been feeling it for weeks. The slow pressure building inside that warns something's wrong before the gauges even show it. I'll have the report on your desk by the end of shift, I said, turning back to the valves. Make it quick, he said. We've got drilling targets to hit. He walked away, and I watched him go, the pit in my stomach growing deeper. I rose through the ranks the old-fashioned way, starting as a roughneck at 26 years in the Navy, taught me how machines worked and how they failed back then. The Gulf was like the Wild West, companies cutting corners, men losing fingers or worse. In my 3rd year, I watched a pressure valve blow on a neighboring platform. The explosion killed 3 men. One had shown me pictures of his newborn daughter the night before. After that, I became religious about safety protocols, studied every manual, took night classes in mechanical engineering, worked up to equipment specialist, then safety officer. I built a reputation as the guy who wouldn't sign off on drilling until everything was verified. Some crews hated me at first until they realized I was protecting their lives more than company property. My ex-wife Vanessa never understood why I turned down shore-based management promotions. You could wear a tie, have weekends off, she said, but she didn't get that I needed to be on the platforms, eyes on the machines. You can't inspect a drill bit from an office in Houston. When she left 8 years ago, she blamed my 14-day rotations away from home, but I knew it was because even when I was home, my mind was offshore, thinking about procedures and maintenance. Some men are built for family life. I was built to keep other men alive. 2 months before Chase arrived, I started noticing changes. New equipment arriving with inspection certificates but no actual inspection marks, maintenance logs with signatures but no detailed notes, supply orders altered after submission, cheaper parts substituted. I raised the issue with my old supervisor, Gary Hamilton, who grimaced and explained budget cuts. Corporate squeezing every platform since last year's price drop. These aren't places to cut, I said. We're talking core safety equipment. Gary just shook his head. I've pushed back. Cal got nowhere. They're bringing in new blood to optimize operations. That's the exact phrase they used. 2 weeks later, Gary was gone, offered early retirement. The crew threw him a goodbye party in the mess hall. He pulled me aside before boarding the helicopter. "Watch yourself, Cal," he said quietly. "They want people who'll sign off on changes, not question them." I nodded. "I know." He gripped my shoulder. "Document everything, every shortcut, every substitution. Build a record." I took his advice seriously, though I didn't yet know how critical it would become. The morning it all came to a head. I was running checks on the blowout preventer, the massive valve assembly designed to seal the well bore if pressure control fails, the last line of defense against catastrophic failure, like the 2010 disaster 100 miles from where I stood, which killed 11 men and spilled millions of barrels of oil. My assistant, Jason Parker, was helping me run diagnostics when I spotted it. Hydraulic fluid levels were dangerously low and the fluid contained particulate contamination, tiny metal shavings indicating internal wear. "This was serviced recently, right?" I asked Jason, though I'd already seen the maintenance logs. "Yes, sir," he replied. "Last week, while you were on shore, Mr. Darnell signed off personally." A cold weight dropped in my stomach. A supervisor signing off on mechanical service was rare, almost unheard of. "Go get me the replacement parts inventory," I said quietly. The parts used for this service Jason returned 15 minutes later with the sheet. One look and I knew. They'd used aftermarket, cheaper, unauthorized components that didn't meet manufacturer specs. The kind of corner cutting that saves thousands short term, but could cost millions in lives if something fails. I photographed the evidence with my phone, added it to the file I'd been building for months, then ordered a full shutdown of the BLP system for testing. Within an hour, Chase stormed into the testing area. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "We're in the middle of a drilling sequence." "The blowout preventer isn't working right," I said evenly. "We have to replace parts and run a full recertification," he spat back. "It was just serviced. I signed off on it myself." I nodded. "That's part of the problem." His face reddened. "Meaning what?" "Meaning whoever did that service used non-spec parts. Meaning whoever signed off either didn't know what they were looking at or didn't care." The crew nearby went quiet, watching the tension unfold. "You're done, Bennett," Chase said, his voice dropping into a threatening tone. "Pack your stuff, you're on the afternoon chopper." I didn't argue or raise my voice, just handed the testing gear to Jason and said, "Full workup, document everything you find." Chase followed me toward the accommodation block. "You think you're indispensable because you've been here forever, but you're just expensive and slow. We have schedules and quotas. Your constant safety paranoia is costing this company money." I stopped and turned to him. "You know what costs money? Funerals, lawsuits, environmental cleanup." He jabbed a finger in my chest. "You're fired for insubordination and disrupting operations. No severance." I simply nodded and went to my quarters to pack. As I stuffed clothes into my duffel bag, I felt oddly calm. This confrontation had been building since Chase arrived. I saw the pattern and understood the stakes. Corporate wanted faster drilling, more production, bigger profits, and Chase was their hammer, smashing anything that slowed them down, including safety. But they'd made a critical mistake. They thought I was just a stubborn old-timer in their way. They had no idea what I'd been uncovering for 8 months. The helicopter ride back to Galveston was loud, as always, but for the first time in years my mind wasn't racing with work details, pressure readings, or schedules I was thinking about what came next. My apartment felt empty when I got home, dusty and quiet after a 21-day extended rotation covering for an injured inspector, 3 weeks on the rig. Then Suddenly nothing. No job waiting after my 7 days off. I showered, ordered pizza, and opened my laptop. First, I backed up every photo, document, and note I'd collected over the past month to an external drive. Then I drafted an email to Raven Rest Energy's HR department. This letter serves as a formal complaint about unsafe working conditions and deliberate safety violations on Platform 6. I have documented numerous cases where critical equipment was improperly maintained, safety protocols bypassed, and valid concerns ignored. Attached are 20 pages of evidence with dates, violations, and photos. I hit send and went to bed. 3 days later, I got a reply, not from HR, but from Lawrence Wilson, Raven Rest's chief legal counsel. The message was short, professional, and clearly aimed at shutting me down. Mr. Bennett, we received your complaint and conducted a thorough internal review. Our findings confirm that all Platform 6 operations comply with acceptable safety standards. Your termination resulted from documented performance issues and causing unnecessary production delays. Further communications with unfounded accusations against Raven Rest Energy may result in legal action for defamation. Regards, Lawrence Wilson, Chief Legal Officer. I read it twice, then closed the laptop. Not surprised, but part of me had hoped they might care about the safety issues I'd raised. Foolish, really. The next morning, I made 2 calls. First, to Alex Reeves, a former colleague now with Blue Water Offshore, a competitor we met for lunch at a seafood spot near the harbor. Raven Rest's been cutting corners for months, Alex said, picking at his grilled fish. It's not just your platform. They're under pressure from shareholders after that dry well last quarter. Stock's down 18%. They're going to get someone killed. I nodded. Probably. But unless something happens, they'll keep pushing the limits. He lowered his voice. Look, Cal, we might have an opening next month, senior safety specialist, not quite what you were doing. Thanks, I said, but I think I need to see this through first. My second call was to the Regional Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement Office. I'd been sending them copies of my reports all along. The woman who answered listened politely, then transferred me to her supervisor. After about 30 seconds, he cut me off. Mr. Bennett, I appreciate your concern, but we don't investigate platforms based on complaints from recently terminated employees without substantial evidence. I have the evidence, I said. 8 months of documentation. We get hundreds of complaints every year, he replied. Most turn out to be disgruntled workers or internal disputes. We have scheduled inspections. If Platform 6 has problems, they'll be found. By then, it might be too late, I said. I understand your frustration, but we have procedures to follow. Good day, Mr. Bennett. The line went dead. I sat holding the phone, feeling the weight of what I faced. A billion-dollar corporation, government agencies bogged down in red tape, and me, just one man with a file full of violations nobody wanted to see. Until they had to 2 weeks after my firing, I was still weighing my options when Jason Parker called. It was his first day off since I left the rig. Cal, he said quietly, probably calling from shore. Things are bad out there. We met at a diner far from the usual industry spots. Jason looked worn, dark circles under his eyes. He glanced around before sliding a USB drive across the table. They've ramped up production by 30%, he said, running the drill motors at max capacity 24/7. The vibration is causing microfractures in the secondary containment systems. I slipped the drive into my pocket. Chase knows? Yeah. He says it's within operational limits, but, Cal, he leaned in, last week we had a pressure spike that nearly triggered an emergency shutdown. Instead of investigating, Chase had the alarm sensitivity lowered. My jaw clenched. Is anyone else speaking up? Nobody who wants to keep their job. Jason stared into his coffee. There's something else. I was in Chase's office dropping off reports, and his computer was open. An email from corporate detailed instructions about what maintenance to skip and what inspections to fast-track. This wasn't solely Chase's doing. It originated from corporate headquarters that evening. I meticulously reviewed the files Jason handed me. Equipment logs, pressure data, inspection reports bearing forged signatures. Yet, the most incriminating piece was a covertly recorded video showing Chase directing the night crew to bypass a safety valve during a high-pressure drilling operation. A blatant violation of federal law that could lead to criminal prosecution. I knew I couldn't approach the BSE with just my testimony against Ravenrest's word, but armed with this new evidence, especially the video, I had concrete proof they couldn't disregard. The following morning, I drove to the regional BSE office in New Orleans for a pre-arranged meeting with Diana Foster, a senior enforcement officer unlike the supervisor I had spoken with earlier. She scrutinized every document thoroughly, watched the video twice, and took comprehensive notes. "This raises serious alarms, Mr. Bennett," she said finally, "especially considering Ravenrest's track record." "Their track record?" I asked cautiously. She studied me intently, then swiveled her monitor for me to see. It displayed Ravenrest Energy's compliance history from the internal BSE database. Dozens of infractions over the last 3 years, mostly minor fines quietly paid and never publicized. "They've been flagged for monitoring," Diana revealed, "but they're tactful. They distribute violations across various platforms and divisions, making sure no single location has enough issues to warrant a full-scale investigation." She scrolled down to Platform 6, "at least until now." I stared at the screen, an icy rage swelling within. This wasn't mere penny-pinching or careless shortcuts. It was deliberate, methodical. They had precise knowledge of the limits they could push without triggering major consequences, and they danced on that edge for years. "They dismissed me for doing my job," I murmured, "for attempting to protect lives." Diana shut the database and folded her hands. "I must be upfront, Mr. Bennett. Pursuing this will unleash fierce resistance from Ravenrest. They have deep pockets and legal teams ready to attack your credibility, labeling you disgruntled, incompetent, or worse, accusing you of evidence tampering." I met her steady gaze. "I have nothing to conceal. 22 years in this field with a spotless record." She gave a small nod. "Excellent, because I'll need you to provide formal statements, possibly testify if it escalates." "I'm ready for whatever it takes." She cautioned, "We cannot shut them down overnight." I realize that, but the men on that rig, time's running out for them. For the next 3 weeks, I worked hand in hand with Diana and her team, guiding them through each piece of evidence, clarifying the technical details behind every violation, and helping them grasp the cumulative hazard mounting on Platform 6. At the same time, I stayed connected with Jason, who kept feeding me updates from the rig conditions worsened. 2 additional near failures with the pressure systems occurred, and Chase pushed harder for faster drilling, pressuring shortcuts that unsettled the crew more with each passing day. "Half the men want transfers," Jason confided, "but they fear being blacklisted. Tell them to log everything," I advised, "and stay prepared." Diana explained the inspection process. It would start with a surprise visit focusing on routine compliance, potentially expanding to a full investigation depending on findings. "We have to build an airtight case," she said. "These companies have beaten us in court when we pushed too far." I understood the bureaucratic hurdles, but patience was difficult with so much at stake. Then Diana called with news. "We've set the initial inspection for next Tuesday," she informed me. "But there's a hitch. Someone from Ravenrest's legal team contacted our director. They're on to us." "They'll cover their tracks," I predicted. "Likely," she confirmed. "So we're sending a regulatory expert who's also a certified mechanical engineer, someone skilled at uncovering hidden problems, even if they've been temporarily masked." The night before the inspection, sleep evaded me. I paced my apartment, repeatedly checking my phone for messages from Jason near midnight. His text arrived. Chase has everyone working overtime, tidying up, no real fixes, just hiding faults. I forwarded it to Diana, who replied immediately, "Expected our teams ready." The inspection team departed early Tuesday morning for Platform 6. Protocol barred me from joining or directly contacting them during the inspection, so I remained in Diana's office, reviewing documents and bracing for their findings. Hours slipped by. The team was due back by 3 p.m., but by 4:30, still no communication. Then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. BOP failed test. Inspector extending review. Chase, losing it. It had to be from Jason or someone on the rig. I showed Diana, who gave a grim nod. That's Anthony's specialty, blowout preventers. If he's lengthening the review, he uncovered something serious. At 6:12 p.m., Diana's phone rang. She listened intently, occasionally questioning while I studied her face. When she hung up, she fixed me with a look of grim satisfaction. They found enough to initiate a Level 3 review. Multiple critical violations, including the compromised BOP system you reported. Anthony said it would have catastrophically failed during a real emergency. What's next? I asked. Drilling will halt starting tomorrow morning, she said. Full regulatory intervention. Every system inspected, every maintenance log examined, every part tested. I exhaled deeply. And Chase? Anthony described him as confrontational. He resisted certain tests, claiming recent certifications. Such behavior triggers even closer scrutiny. She gathered her papers. This is just the beginning, Cal. As we dig deeper, I expect we'll uncover far more. I nodded, feeling vindicated yet strangely hollow. The battle wasn't over, it was entering a new stage. But for the first time in months, I felt I'd fulfilled my duty, to protect the men on that rig, even when no one else would. The regulatory intervention spanned 4 weeks. Each day brought fresh revelations, forged maintenance records, inferior replacement parts, disabled alarms, unauthorized alterations to vital safety systems. The BSE inspectors uncovered more than 78 serious violations, the highest ever documented on a single platform. I was summoned repeatedly to provide background and technical insights. Every time I stepped into the BCE offices, I passed Raven Rest Energy's lawyers whose faces grew darker with each visit. Twice I spotted Chase Darnell waiting quietly in the lobby. He wouldn't dare meet my gaze. Diana kept me posted on the investigation's progress and mounting repercussions. We've been imposing daily fines of $1.2 million for ongoing violations, she told me one afternoon. And based on our findings, the probe has expanded to 3 more Raven Crest platforms. The story broke first in industry publications, then exploded into national headlines. Major safety breaches forced shutdown of Gulf oil platform. Raven Crest stock plummeted as investors panicked over potential liabilities and regulatory crackdowns across their holdings. Then came the day of the formal hearing. The Department of the Interior assembled a special panel to review the BCE's findings and decide on penalties. The room was packed with government officials, industry reps, and media. I sat quietly in the back, watching as Diana and her team laid out their case. Projection screens displayed images of decayed equipment, disabled safety systems, and falsified records. Then they played Jason's video showing Chase explicitly ordering the crew to bypass safety protocols. The panel chairman asked, "Where did this video come from?" Diana glanced at me and replied, "From a crew member concerned about safety violations, one among several whistleblowers providing evidence." Chase, seated beside Raven Rest's legal team, finally noticed me, his face drained of color as realization hit. He whispered urgently to the lawyer next to him, who only shook his head. Too late. Far too late. The panel ruled unanimously. Maximum penalties on all violations. mandatory supervised overhaul of every safety system, and criminal referral for the most serious federal safety breaches, Raven Crest Platform 6 would remain shuttered indefinitely. 3 months after the hearing, I stood on the deck of the Blue Water Horizon platform, watching a helicopter emerge through morning mist. The rotors kicked up spray as it settled on the helipad, and a group of men in bright safety vests hurried out beneath the blades, new recruits for my safety program. After Raven Crest made headlines, job offers poured in from across the sector, but Alex Reeves at Blue Water Offshore made the most compelling offer: build a new safety compliance division from scratch with me at the helm, complete control over inspection protocols, maintenance standards, and training. The industry's shaken, Alex said. Nobody wants to be the next Raven Rest. We're turning safety from a cost center into a selling point with clients and regulators. I accepted on one condition. I could bring my own team. Jason Parker was my first hire, followed by 4 others from Platform 6 who had quietly supported my documentation efforts all along. As the trainees gathered in the orientation room, I stepped forward. No PowerPoint slides, no fancy graphics, just hard-earned truths. My name's Cal Bennett. For 22 years, I've worked these platforms, seen the good and the bad. The difference usually isn't equipment or technology. It's the people willing to speak up when something's wrong. A few faces lit with recognition. They'd heard the story of Raven Rest. The whistleblower who exposed a culture of corner cutting, Chase Darnell, served 8 months in a minimum security prison. I continued, Raven Rest Energy paid over $200 million in fines and still hasn't reopened Platform 6, all because they treated safety protocols as red tape. I looked each of them in the eye. Out here, there are no small mistakes. You're the last line of defense for yourselves, your crew, and the Gulf. Never forget that. As I spoke, I felt a weight lift, a burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Not the responsibility. I'd bear that gladly for the rest of my career, but the loneliness of fighting alone. Now I had a team, a mission, and the power to make it count.